you, Emily. Do a screen share here. Are we good?
We're good.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to make you all bigger so I can see all of you. Excellent. All right. Thank you for the invite. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Melissa Giovanni, and I am coming to you from fabulous Las Vegas, which is Nuubi Southern Paiute ancestral land. And I am a geologist by training. For the past 5 years, I've been teaching environmental science at the community college here. And also for the past 5 years, I have been a backpacking guide with the Grand Canyon Conservancy Field Institute. And through the Field Institute, I have gotten to go on 2 river trips, and I'm going on the River GTS trip that launches on Thursday. So hope to see some of you guys there. And as you can see from the title of this talk, we're going to talk about climate change because we know, everyone here, I know all of you know that it is real, but sometimes it's hard to make it real for our guests. And this has been kind of a focus of my own teaching evolution over the past many years. I taught geology for 10 years, and now this switch to environmental science has really made me aware of, like, you know, some of the issues just in getting these ideas across. So I want you to imagine you're on a beach somewhere in the river, right? You've had a great day, dinner's made, dishes are done, you are chill. Like, it is gonna be a great night. And then a guest plops down next to you and says, so, Melissa, you keep talking about how climate change is affecting the canyon, but how do you know anything about climate change? Internal monologue is, oh, I was having such a nice night, but they asked a question, so teachable moment. Here we go. All right, so I am going to throw out all the data at them, all the facts. I have got facts on facts. So let's do this. And then it'll turn into a discussion about science. You know, science is great, but maybe then it's not going as well as you thought, and it starts to turn emotional. And then, you know, you're going to try to bring things back into perspective. So that's sort of how I've arranged this talk. You know, give me a graph and I'm happy. So yeah, let's talk about the data of climate change, right? For example, did you know that we have models that show that in order to explain the observed temperature rises over the past 100 years, you cannot explain it with only natural forcing, that you do need human forcing, that the Arctic is warming faster than anywhere on the planet? And you remember that polar vortex thing that hit Texas a few weeks ago? Yeah, that's because the Arctic is actually heating up faster, and it's actually above freezing during the winter up there now, which means that the ice is melting, and every year it melts more and more, and it's not growing back nearly as fast. Did you know that carbon dioxide emissions are rising? You've probably heard that, but did you know that for the last million years, it has not hit the current concentrations? And sea levels are rising. Have you seen Florida? And also animals are going extinct faster now than they have for the last several thousand years. And I can hear your eyes rolling back into your heads right now, because it's so much, right? It's so overwhelming. And there's our graphs, and, you know, like, unless you're a nerd, graphs are kind of scary and they're intimidating. And what's a 2 sigma anyway? And, you know, like, this is like, think of how you're feeling right now. You've already checked out, which is legit. So did I, and this is my slide. But, you know, like, it's too much. And also it's hard to connect to a graph, right? Like polar bears, well, I don't live in the Arctic, what do I care? And besides, isn't it a good thing if the ice melts, because then global shipping will increase? I mean, there's a ship stuck in the Suez Canal right now. You know, it's not building a connection. People have trouble connecting to data. We just do, even us nerds do, right? Like, it's a way to explain it, but to that person sitting next to you on the beach, they're going to turn to me now and they're like, yeah, okay. You know, and this is true. I did do this. I drew graphs in the sand, you know, and explained CO2 concentrations. And they turned to me and said, well, yeah, but why do you believe in climate change? So that's a word that I listen for. Why do I believe in climate change? So my reply to them is that I don't believe in climate change. I don't believe in global warming. I don't believe that humans are causing the changes that we see around us. Because science is not a belief system. So when you hear a question phrased like that, and this is so common, right? Because it is more how we talk. It is in the media all the time, which is one of my pet peeves, right? Scientists believe that. We believe this. I find it's useful to say, okay, before we go any further, let's talk about that word. I don't believe in climate change. What I do is I understand how science works, and I can accept the conclusions that scientists come to based off of what they've done. So stepping back and just maybe making sure that your discussion is grounded in this reality is sometimes a good way to reframe the question, to reframe the discussion. So I have a little cartoony thing here that I'm not going to go through in detail, but one thing that's useful is to tell, the person you're talking to and remind them that, in fact, we are all scientists. We all do the same processes in our brains without even knowing it, right? So what is science? Science is a series of steps by which we make observations of the world around us, and then we try to explain those observations, right? And our original scientific instruments are our senses. Right? We see, we hear, we taste, we touch, we smell. That's how we experience the objective reality that is around us. So that's what empirical data is. It's what can we sense? And so, we are all scientists. We all do this all the time, right? This is my extremely mundane, non-threatening example of science. Hey, I wanted some toast. I don't have toast. Why don't I have toast? Come up with a potential solution. Outlet's broken, toaster's broken, power's out, right? We all do this automatically. You make a prediction on if I plug it in somewhere else, it'll work. And what happens, right? You then experiment, you test it, it either works or it doesn't, but then you end up with more questions. That is science. Science is a series of steps. It is not a belief system. Okay? I don't believe in gravity. Doesn't stop gravity from existing, right? So separating those two is very useful, just so that you can help your discussion partner understand, like, all that data that I just threw at you, all those graphs, those are not grounded in some belief that I have. Those are objective realities that we've been able to observe and measure. And from that, right, we would get a conclusion that, wow, based on CO2 concentrations, they are spiking at a rate that they have not done so for at least the last million years. So examples like that. So first, lay that groundwork that we are, in fact, dealing with, facts and an objective reality. So once you've done that, great, right? They're like, okay, well, I understand what science is. You've explained the scientific method. Cool. Yeah, you've got all these graphs and this data. I don't believe it. Right? And this is not a new phenomenon, but it has definitely become, let's say, louder over the last few years. So, in all realms, even beyond climate change, I don't care what data you put in front of me. I don't believe it. So as a scientist, I have struggled with this. I fundamentally don't understand, like, wait, how can that be? So I've done some research into this. I'm not going to go into it super detail. There are social, psychological reasons. There are evolutionary, biological reasons. There are neurological reasons why somebody can be presented with actual facts, right? Like literal numbers, and say, nah, it's not real, right? Those are alternative facts, which we really need to stop that phrase. So as a very brief summary of what I've learned as I've struggled with how to deal with this is, what's really fascinating is, from the neurological point of view, the part of your brain that lights up when you're presented with a physical threat, right? That flight or fright response. Your brain is like, danger, danger, danger. And you're gonna run or you're gonna fight back. That is the same part of your brain that lights up if presented with an idea that contradicts your worldview, that contradicts your identity and how you identify within your safe group, right? Your bubble. And if that idea is going to threaten your survival, right? Within that bubble, your brain's like, nope, not having it, which is fascinating. And that could be a whole nother talk, but it's useful to at least know that, oh, okay, that's what's happening. That's why somebody is being like, despite all of my data, despite all of my evidence, they're just like, nah, it's not real. Okay, well, great. It's good as a scientist, like, okay, at least there's an explanation for it. But what do we do? What am I supposed to do with that? I mean, I'm at least half Vulcan, and it would definitely be useful if we were all just Vulcans and it was logical and we could just apply reason and answer, problem solve. But humans are messy and emotional and irrational, and that is terrifying. So how do we deal with that, right? How do I get somebody to say, like, I need to break past their blockage here, right? Like, okay, the facts didn't work. So now I've got to appeal to their human side. And this is where you all come in, because you guys already all do this. You're storytellers. You are good at getting at people's emotions. So as somebody who is brought up in the sciences, right, I was just taught, just say the facts and ergo, therefore they will agree with, they'll agree with it. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. So you guys are better storytellers than I would say most of us sciencey types are. And I'd say us sciencey types, we need to get better at being storytellers, but you guys are already doing that. So appealing to the human side of things, which means appealing to something that is real to them, right? What is their experience? What is their perspective? How do they experience the world around them? Can you relate what's happening in Grand Canyon to that? So, I mean, I could list all of the ways that climate change is affecting Grand Canyon. You guys already all know this, so I don't need to really go into it in detail. But of course, species migrating due to the changing climate, species disappearing, of course, wildfires, which are being exacerbated by the increasing drought that we're experiencing, the Colorado River ecosystem, which you just heard all about, both from the vegetation point of view, from the native fish species, and of course, invasive species. And then the human caused changes, right? Us dumping trout in the river, the dams, more and more people coming, the development issues, pollution, right? So there is human change, which can be exacerbated by the bigger global changes. And one of the challenges of teaching in the field, like when we're below the rims, is of course that we don't have access to technology, which is also the best thing about teaching in the field below the rim, right? Up here, I'm showing documentaries and YouTube videos, and there's all kinds of amazing stories that can be shared visually or audibly via technology. But down below, at the river level, that's a little more challenging, but you guys know how to spin a yarn with just your words, And so what I'm going to suggest is having, maybe a small library of just pictures, right? These are light, they fold up, they stick in an ammo box really easily, but having pictures to show people those impacts is very useful. That then gives you a starting point to tell a story. So obviously, condors, that's an easy story to tell, but what's the future going to be of condors? Okay, we know how to tell the story of what happened to them, how we brought them back from the brink, but what is going to happen to them going forward based on our understanding of the science that tells us that the Southwest is going to continue to experience warming temperatures and increasing drought. Also, the invasive species that we've brought in, what are their impacts? Wildfires are kind of an easy one. Unfortunately, they of course are getting worse. They're getting more intense, not only because of warming temperatures, increasing drought, but also human practices regarding fire ecology. Mining is a big one. Most people don't ever think about where their stuff comes from. Vast majority of our stuff starts in the ground in some form or another. Conversation you might have regarding climate change is people say, well, we got to get off fossil fuels for energy. Let's just switch to nuclear, which is an easy conversation to then start having in Grand Canyon region because of all the uranium mining. But if they're not from this part of the country or world, they may have no idea. And then also ask them, well, what are the impacts? What do you know about the impacts of nuclear? Sure, there's no carbon emissions, but that uranium's got to come from somewhere. Also, where's it going to go? And as somebody who lives 100 miles from Yucca Mountain, we're a little sensitive to that over here in Nevada, you know? So what are the future impacts going to be? Water, of course, you know, we're all hypersensitive to it. We're on the river, for crying out loud, right? But, you know, for people who are not from the Southwest or the West in general, it is amazing. You know, we take it for granted that people understand water issues. No, I've had friends come from back east and they're helping me do my dishes and they're leaving the water running. Like, what are you doing? You know, because that's not anything they've ever had to think about. So, you know, images of the befores and afters, and that's you know, Lake Mead is of course much lower now than that picture is. Lake Powell, the same thing. You know, we're hypersensitive to that, but most people aren't. The changes to the Colorado simply because of a big pile of concrete. I'm sure most of us in this room would not be terribly sad to see Glen Canyon disappear, but there are 40 million people in the Southwest and it is growing. What does this mean? If the Southwest is getting drier, what does this mean? You know, I'm 1,000% opposed to those dams proposed on the Little Colorado, but right, like, where are we going to get water for these increasingly growing cities of Phoenix, LA, and yes, my beloved Vegas. So side note, we are more sustainable than we look, and we're doing way better than Arizona and California. That said, right, one question I like to ask people is, have you ever eaten lettuce in winter? And they're like, yeah, of course I have. And I was like, well, then you've eaten the Colorado River, because winter lettuce in the US comes from the Imperial Valley. And the only reason there's lettuce there is because of this river that you're sitting on right now. And especially if they're from anywhere else. Wow, what? Yeah, because we don't think about where our food comes from either. So these are ways that you're connecting Grand Canyon specific issues to them in a way that guarantee they've probably never thought of before. I also bring pictures, you know, of other parts of the world, because you ask them, like, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Colorado. How are your winters? How have your winters been? You know, ask them for their experiences. They may be skeptical about this whole climate change thing, but if you ask them, what changes have you noticed where you live, without even asking about climate change, chances are you can relate it back to climate change, right? So this is, you know, the pine forests are being decimated by the pine beetle infestations. You know, those are all dead trees that have been killed by pine beetle, which are now, of course, fuel for fires. So these intensifying wildfires that we're seeing in the West are, you know, projected to continue and to get worse. If you hear them talking about, like, oh, I went to Hawaii last year, or I'm going to go scuba diving in Florida or Belize or wherever, ask them, were those coral reefs alive? You know, chances are they don't know, or sure, they kind of look like it. They were really white. Oh, white corals are actually bleached. They've been damaged by climate change, right? So show them the sad pictures. I guarantee whatever you're feeling right now is far more intense than me showing you a graph of Arctic sea ice disappearing. And then, okay, this isn't exactly climate change, but one of the other major issues we have, right? Plastic pollution. Pictures really do speak far more than the actual graphs, right? I could show you a graph of the gajillion tons of plastic in the oceans, but I'd say this picture does it pretty well. So, great. Now that I've depressed you all on a Sunday morning, you know, that's great. I've now wrangled your emotions. Another tool that I find really helpful is to put us humans into some sort of scale, right? Especially in Grand Canyon. We're sitting here going, oh, you know, the youngest rocks are 270 million and the oldest rocks are 1.8 billion. And I don't know what a million of anything is, right? Doubtless any of us can really relate to those kinds of scales. So my favorite thing for putting both Grand Canyon, I have a whole exercise of this that puts Grand Canyon events into geologic time, or into a clock scale. Happy to share that if you'd like. But putting the entire Earth into a day, right? We understand hours. We can relate to a 24-hour period. And then figuring out, so I've done the math for you guys. I'm not going to ask you to do it, right? But figuring out where do we come in on this whole thing? So again, the entire Earth being 24 hours old, so we have an entire day to get to the next day. It keeps working down to this. So if the Grand Canyon started carving between 4 and 6 million years ago, that was 2 minutes ago. If the entire Earth is a day old, so the Grand Canyon's been here for 2 minutes on this scale. Where do we come in? Oh, yeah. Archaeologically, Homo sapiens, 200,000 and 250,000 years ago, that's 4 seconds. If the Earth is 24 hours old, our species has been here for 4 seconds, but that's our entire species, right? That's arising in Africa and then moving out of Africa and spreading around the globe. We know that humans have at least been in Grand Canyon for 10,000 years. That's 0.2 of a second. But the people who have been here since time immemorial, they lived in harmony with the environment. How long have we not been living in harmony with the environment? Really, like 200 years. The Industrial Revolution, right? That we started.
Hey, Melissa, we're about 2 minutes over, so just wrap it up. Great, thanks.
I'm at the end. So anyway, yeah. So if you put modern humanity into scale, that's 4/1000ths of a second. Whole point being that we have done all of this extremely quickly. I have this little cartoon that is a scale of climate change since the ice ages. It is very useful. The whole point is that at the bottom, it shows that there is like the changes we've seen in terms of global temperature rise are at the very last second, in the last 4/1000ths of a second. So here we go. Yes, climate change is real. Yes, we're causing it. Yes, we're sure. But when the facts aren't getting through, you appeal to their emotions. So because I depressed the hell out of all of you guys, know that you are making a difference, because honestly, the guy sitting next to you going like, climate change is a hoax, they are dwindling. Oftentimes, it's not that people don't care, it's that they don't know. And so by you guys sharing everything you know, you are helping people to get to that caring. And that's, of course, step 1 towards conservation. So I like assigning homework. Here's your homework. It will be on the final. I will put my email in the chat and I will send you all of this gladly. So sorry for going over, my bad.
Melissa, it was absolutely necessary. Thank you so much. You are getting a ton of love in the chat. So I hope you will go back and read some of that affirmation. Thank you. If you have direct questions for Melissa, please, Dr. Giovanni, if you'll please direct message her. And we really hope that you will share the presentation and the materials with folks who are able to do that. So thank you.